Hey, this is Jamie with Stonemaier Games, and I am adjusting my lighting. Welcome to this week's live cast. I'm excited to be here and to answer your questions, talk about some random topics and some Stonemaier related stuff, a few small Stonemaier related things. We're in the middle of the month, so we usually don't make big announcements in the middle of the month, but I do have like a little thing to share, a few other little things, I think. Let me start off because I don't want to forget this, but someone emailed me, someone who can't make it here live, emailed, I think their name was Rudy, emailed me a question that they wanted to know about, and I think this is a great topical question. It was released, the news was released a few days ago that a company called AEG, a company that actually isn't too far from St. Louis here, AEG is releasing Elizabeth Hargrave's next game. Elizabeth is the designer of Wingspan, and her next game coming out is called Mariposas, or Mariposa. It refers to butterflies and butterfly migration. And the person, I think their name was Rudy, asked, did Elizabeth submit this game to us? And if so, why didn't we accept it? Or why would we not accept a game from such a successful designer as Elizabeth? And I thought I would answer that real quick. I do see a question over here. Someone asked, how is Iron Harvest? And I don't know, John, I'm not involved with Iron Harvest. That's a digital game that's unrelated to Stonemaier Games. So let me get back to this Mariposa question, which is, yes, Elizabeth did. I would say she essentially submitted it to us. She basically shared it with us and said, "What do you think? Do you think this could be a good fit for Stonemaier Games?" Which I really appreciate her doing. It's not required for her to do that at all. I think actually think it's great for Elizabeth to have published games from a variety of different publishers. I think that's great for any designer to not just be locked into one publisher or even feel like they're locked into one. It's better to have a bunch of eggs in different baskets, in my opinion. So she did send it to us. Alan and I played it, I think, twice, and Alan's my co-founder, and we really liked it. I don't mean to stammer there. It's a great game. It was a great game, but it did not feel like a Stonemaier game at that point in terms of the depth and amount of progression that you feel during the game. Very streamlined mechanisms, great, interesting choices in the game, but it didn't have that sense of progression or depth. And so I emailed Elizabeth back, and I was like, this game could be a big hit. Even as it is, I think it could be a big hit with the right audience. But currently, its audience is not Stonemaier Games. So I would be interested in developing this game further with you and adding that sense of depth and progression. But that might turn it into a game that you don't want. It doesn't look like with this game that you were aiming for Wingspan level depth. And if that's the case, I totally respect that and talk to other companies about it. And if not, if you want to explore that with us, you can do that too. I put the decision obviously in her hands. It's totally her choice. And she decided to go with the lighter version of the game. And I think AEG will do a fantastic job with it. So I look forward to playing the final version. I imagine AEG has developed it at least somewhat beyond what we originally played. But even if it was published in the version that we played, Elizabeth had done a fantastic job with a light game. I would say on the weight of like a Ticket to Ride, which is a great, fantastic game in itself. So long answer to your question. Hopefully that does answer your question. Yeah, just in the end, it wasn't a good fit for Stonemaier Games in its current form, and I respect Elizabeth's decision for wanting to keep it in that current form, maintaining her vision, and finding a publisher that was on the same page as her. Yeah. Someone else, Tony mentioned that AEG does Tiny Towns, another great game, and yeah, Tiny Towns is a great game. I would say that's pretty much on the same weight as Mariposas as well. John says, do I own the intellectual property for the world of Scythe? So the world is actually called the 1920 Plus world, and that world is owned by Jakub Brzezowski. I own the Stonemaier Games owns the tabletop rights to that world, in which Scythe is the tabletop game in that world. Let's do chocolate of the day. Why not? Let's talk chocolate. This is right in front of me here. I am eating Black Mountain Signature Dark Chocolate today. I've started to eat it already, and it is delicious. It's really, really good. I'm not going to eat the whole thing today. I hope not, but this is my chocolate of the day. What is yours? What chocolate are you, or what desk treat are you eating today at work or from home? Let me do a little Stonemaier Games news, the little thing I wanted to mention today, and I might have something else here that I forgot. But we, as of today, as of this morning, we are offering Wingspan's purple eggs for sale as an a la carte item on our web store. Do you need these? No, not at all. There are plenty of these are included in the expansion, and there were plenty of eggs included in the base game of Wingspan. But some people like extra eggs, or some people really just like the color purple. Maybe you want to replace all of your eggs with the purple eggs. Yeah, so we had enough. Basically, we are willing to sell a la carte items like this if we're able to get them to our different fulfillment centers, and if we can find a price that makes it worth it when we actually have to ship the items and things like that. And I think we've done that with these eggs, and also when we get past the initial bump of replacement parts for a new product. But and I'm showing these to you in the case. The case is not included. You can buy these cases separately on our web store. It's just the 15 purple eggs that come in the Wingspan European expansion. We are now selling them separately on our web store, our egg store. Yeah, you can find them, and I'm not sure if the other eggs are in stock right now, but they probably should be. So you can buy those or the original eggs and the original eggs as you want. These are a separate item than the original eggs from Wingspan, which we do also sell separately. Yeah, so that's perhaps the only Stonemaier Games news that I have for today. There might be something else. Oh yeah, there's something that's not all that interesting, but I'll mention it later. Amin says, what are some of the pros and cons of co-designing a game? Yeah, that's a good question. So I have co-designed a few expansions. I've co-designed one game that we haven't published yet. And early on in the process, Alan kind of acted as a co-designer, more like a lead playtester, but at the time it felt like a co-designer. So from what I know about it, some of the pros are you have that person who feels just as passionate about the game as you do, hopefully, and you can always have them to bounce ideas off of, and they understand the game really well, just as well as you do, and so you can really discuss things and figure things out. You always have a go-to playtester, someone to work on the game with you. That is all great. Those are some of the huge pros. One of the small cons I found is that I think it's really tough to have a truly equitable spread of work in a co-design. Usually a game needs a lead designer, in my opinion. They need someone who actually takes all those discussions and actually does something with them. I think it's much easier probably to co-write a book, like the Expanse series is co-written by two authors who write under one name, and they write alternate chapters. One writes one chapter, then the other one writes the next chapter, and so on. But in game design, it's just all mixed in there. It's just one hodgepodge of stuff. And so you need someone to actually execute the ideas at a certain point, to actually build the prototype, to actually make those changes, make decisions. And so I think that's one of the challenges. It's not necessarily a con, but I think it's a challenge. I think it's important if you go into a co-design to decide who's going to be the lead designer, who's actually going to execute all those decisions and do the grunt work elements of designing the game. Make sure that's clear up front. Otherwise, it can become a con. Tony says, we played Viticulture for the first time this weekend. He said, I'm always hesitant to read these compliments, but Tony says something nice. He says, man, these Stonemaier games hit the worker placement sweet spot. Since I'm new to the game and I lost, any play strategy or advice you can give? Should I be building structures right away? Yeah, Tony, that's a good question. My general advice for Viticulture is two things. One, take advantage of every opportunity to get bonuses, whether those bonuses come from visitor cards, from bonuses on action spaces, if they're available, if you're playing a 3 to 6 player game, or bonuses on the wake up track that if turn order isn't all that important to you. The other thing that I highly recommend is get grapes on your crush pad as early and often as possible, because they will age and age and age over the course of the game, and there's really no limit until they hit that 9 value spot. So get them moving. They're going to age on their own, and so it's nice to have them on your crush pad gaining value without you needing to do anything else until you're ready to turn them into wine. Those are my two main things. Jeff says, how does your approach to game design influence your approach to running Stonemaier games, and how has running a business influenced your creativity? Yeah, two great questions there. The first thing that comes to mind, or the main thing that comes to mind for game design influencing my approach to running Stonemaier games, is that in game design, I really try, I don't always succeed, but I try to put myself in the shoes of a variety of different types of players, to experience the game from their eyes, from their brains, from their hearts, and make a game that is fun for a wide variety of people. fun and accessible to a wide variety of people. And I try to do that same thing when running my business. I try to put myself in your shoes to say, you know, are you enjoying this thing that I'm doing? Is this fun for you? Is this interesting? Is this intuitive for you? Whatever I am doing in running the business. So trying to put myself in your shoes is something that I try to do both for game design and for running Stonemaier games. How has running a business influenced my creativity? It's mostly, it's influenced it in terms of time. So not so much an influence, but impacted it in terms of time, the time that I had to spend on designing games versus running the business. Like yesterday, I was really excited to work on some game designs, and stuff just kept coming up. And it's one of those days where I just did business stuff all day, and it was fun. I say that not begrudgingly, although I do like to have even just a little bit of creative time every day. And maybe I should have just blocked off some time and made it happen, but it didn't happen. And fortunately, I think today is looking a lot more clear. So this afternoon, I should have some fun creative time. Some games I played in this past week were Takenoko. I played that a few times with Megan this weekend. Played Fantastic Factories at game night. Played Monara a few times at game night. That was a really fun cooperative dexterity game that I played at game night. And I played Tapestry. I got to play Tapestry. My birthday was last week, and so I kind of played the birthday card, saying I wanted to play Tapestry. And there were two of my friends who hadn't played, so it was a good opportunity to teach them. And we had a blast, or at least I had a blast. I think most people generally had fun. Megan won. I finished in 3rd out of 5, and yeah, I had a good time. I played. What civilization was I? I was the. Now I'm blanking on it. I can't remember. There's a photo on Instagram that shows who I played. But yeah, I had a good time doing that. Those are the games I played this last week. And tonight, I'm really looking forward to playing Role Player, and I'm also going to play Skulk Hollow very soon. So Role Player and Skulk Hollow. I played Role Player before. I'm just kind of itching to play it. And then Skulk Hollow is a new 2-player game that I have not played that I'm looking forward to. Michael says, for playing Viticulture for the first time, someone else playing Viticulture for the first time, what expansions would I suggest to use, if any? You will definitely hear a difference of opinion about this if you ask this in the Viticulture group or elsewhere. As a designer, my answer is probably pretty obvious. I highly suggest you just play with the base game, because the base game is the standard version of the game. It's the core game. I would highly suggest you just play with that the first time, and really the first several times, and then add some of the expansions in, or any of the expansions. I think Tuscany is like the go-to expansion, but more visitors and Visit from the Ride Valley also add some nice variety to the game. But I highly recommend just playing with the core game first. I respect the opinions of people who disagree, but that's the core game of Viticulture. I think it's much more fun to play that, experience it a few times, and then add on to it and enhance it with these other expansions, so that you have that experience of leveling up to those new expansions rather than starting with them right away. Josh says, what new games coming up in 2020 are you most excited about, other than your own, of course? And Josh, this is a great topic to segue into a Kickstarter topic I wanted to mention today. But let me answer your question properly first. I have this list on my, let's see, I did a top 10 list of 2019. And on that list, I mentioned the games that I was most looking forward to in 2020. Some of them have already arrived, like Isle of Cats is one that I'm really looking forward to. It has arrived. I will be playing that in the near future. Namiji is one. That's like the Tokaido sequel. Honeybuzz, the Zoro dice game, Fossilis, Calico, Time of Legends, Destinies, Lots, Project L, Burger Brothers 2, Sleeping Gods, The 100 Tori, High Rise, Wizard Kittens, and Tidal Blades are the games that I put on my list that I'm looking forward to in 2020. And let me segue over to Kickstarter, because yesterday was a huge day for tabletop games on Kickstarter. Really, this week has been. It started with 2 launches, one Dungeon Ball from a blogger, Gabe Barrett, who runs the Board Game Design Lab. Unfortunately, this project is not doing as well as I would hope it would. At the same time, Gabe knows that it is a sports-themed game. Sports-themed tabletop games do not often do well, but Gabe is a really great designer, and he's very generous to the game design community. So it's at 78% funded right now. I'll refresh the page. Hopefully, it's a little bit more. So I think it will fund. It's just not going to be a wild success like I would hope for anything that Gabe does. That was, I think, a Monday launch. Another Monday launch, I believe, was the Beyond the Monolith core system, which is a very interesting game to follow, especially in contrast to Return to the Dark Tower, a game that launched yesterday. because both games set really, really high funding goals, like $700,000. And for various reasons, I think both of them knew that they actually needed that money to bring these games to life. They're very expensive games. I don't know if that's exactly the amount that they needed, but I did read a blog post about Beyond the Monolith and how they it's not just cost of the game, but like all the operations that go into making the game happen, all that stuff. Whatever, people have different budgets. Anyway, they set the price, and they're the total tale of two different stories. Beyond the Monolith is probably not going to fund. It's only at 35% funded with 5 days to go. Return to the Dark Tower is almost at 200% funded, so far they've raised $1.6 million in just over a day, with 19 days to go. So very interesting to see two different projects received very differently, with very high funding goals, very expensive buy-ins for both of them, being received in very different ways by tabletop fans. Then there's also Foundations of Rome. We have some kind of Euro games here. Foundations of Rome and Oath, Chronicles of Empire and Exile. That's the follow-up from the designer of Root. And that one's doing very well. That one's almost at $550,000. And Foundations of Rome is almost at 400% funded at $200,000. These are all games that I'm interested in. I'm listening currently to Rob Davio on the Game Design Roundtable podcast, talking about Return to the Dark Tower. And as he's talking about it, I'm like, oh, that actually would be pretty cool. $125, I think, is a lot of money, but it does sound pretty cool. Oath, what the designer, I think Cole, is doing with Oath, just sounds really interesting. He's a really, really interesting designer. I'm curious to see how that. I haven't backed it yet, but I'm very tempted to back that one. And then Foundations of Rome, it looks like a really satisfying spatial game, city building and spatial game. So I'm curious about that one too. So I'm curious about what you're backing. Are you backing any of those? Why or why not? Why do you think there's such a big difference between Beyond the Monolith not doing well at all versus Return to Dark Tower doing so well, even though both are kind of similar projects in terms of that funding goal and the buy-in? I'm very curious about your thoughts there. Carol says that she went to a small Wisconsin convention this weekend, and it was great seeing Stonemaier games in the play and win section. Yeah, we love to give to play and win sections at conventions. It's a really big part of our marketing strategy. Kai says, what do I prefer to eat while watching TV? Potato chips or chocolate? So like salty or sweet. I usually am eating a meal when I watch TV. So I'm eating whatever my lunch or dinner is. I'm just snacking. It's usually, and then I usually dovetail into dessert. So I would say usually chocolate. Lisa says, we have a meeting this weekend to discuss reinvigorating our game design community in Dayton and at Epic Loot Games. Any suggestions or inspirations? Lisa, that's an interesting question. In reinvigorating, so I'm curious, Lisa, what made you feel that it's not invigorated at this time? From my outside perspective, it seems like the game design community is really blossoming, but perhaps you're saying specifically that you're not seeing. Maybe those designers are still there, but they're designing at home or playtesting at home rather at your game store. I don't have an immediate answer to that. But just something off the top of my head would be, what if you encouraged, what if you hosted events where designers could show up and have playtesters, because designers are always looking for playtesters. And two, what if you had prototype style components available for those designers to use at the spur of the moment, like not a ton of stuff, but just dice that they can use, cubes that they can use, little resource tokens, coins, that type of thing, things that designers can pull at the last minute if they need to pivot and change their design on the fly as they're playtesting at Epic Loot Games. Just a thought off the top of my head. Jeff gives the tip of sell one of your vineyards early in viticulture, and that is also a great tip, honestly. Yeah, you don't need it's not vineyards, it's fields. You don't need all 3 fields in viticulture. In fact, having 3 can often be a detriment to you winning the game. So selling one early can be a way for you to get a lot of money early in the game. Jan Willem says, I just got a copy of Charterstone the other day. Which is great. Charterstone is going to be back in print very soon, but I'm glad that you were able to get a copy. Because of the legacy aspect, I was wondering, in your mind as the game designer, would be the ideal number to play the game with? Does playing solo Automa mode take away from the experience of the game? I think it's just up to what you prefer. I designed the multiplayer version, 2 to 6 players, so I designed it to work without any assistance from the Automa. You can let the Automa assist you or act as players. It doesn't need it. But a lot of people said that they do enjoy adding the other players, the Automa players, when they play with fewer than 6 players. Also, if you just enjoy playing solo, it is a fully functional, I've heard great reviews of it solo, so you can play it solo as well. I think my recommendation would be if you have 6 players, actually no, I'll say this. My recommendation will be find as many people who are really excited to play a 12-game Euro campaign game with you. I think if people are excited about it and they want to play the game with you, they want the experience of that game, that's your ideal player count, however many that is. The actual number of players, I think, is much less relevant than how eager players are to commit to that and play through that campaign with you. Daniel says, over time, how do you think being a publisher has changed you as a person? Ooh, that's a deep question, Daniel. How do I think it's changed me as a person? I think mostly it's just maybe get to know myself better, the things that I am good at and the things that I'm not good at, the things that I get excited about and the things that I really don't get excited about. And being able to say yes or no to those things and respecting my time and also respecting the time of other people. One of the big things also that I learned right from the beginning and that I've continued to, I think, learn and grow over time is this happened when I launched the Viticulture campaign. You might have read this. I don't know if you've read my crowdfunding book, but leading up to the campaign, I was very excited to make this game, but I kind of had made the campaign a little bit about me, why I was passionate about this, why it was my passion project and about me. And as soon as the campaign launched, I realized it kind of hit me, just snapped, that it wasn't about me, that it was about other people who wanted to play the game. It was about them. It wasn't about me at all. It wasn't about my story. It was about their story and the story that they wanted to tell through the game, through Viticulture. And so that has been something that I've really learned about myself and embraced throughout the duration of my company. That it's not about me. I think I want to respect the things that I enjoy. I want to be able to have fun and do the things that I love. But I want to think about other people all the time and think about what's important to you. And I'm not saying this from a business perspective, but just as a personal perspective. I want to look at the people around me and figure out what's making them happy. I think it's even changed me as a gamer. So when I play games now, I want to make sure other people are having fun. Like their fun is more important than my fun. So that is something that I don't know if that was always the case, but it definitely is now. Chris challenges me to be the Foxen Heroes in Skull Hollow. Is that a good first game hero faction to play? I'm looking for maybe a good first game faction to try, but if that is, I'm happy to try Foxen Heroes. So I talked about Kickstarter, I talked about the games I played recently, some blog entries and posts I did recently. I did something about Google Voice the other day. Our new director of communications, Joe, hooked us up with Google Voice, which has been a true blessing for us because typically people end up calling my cell phone by accident, not realizing that it's not a number that I have purposely listed for business purposes at all. And so now it's nice to have that Google Voice number. I talked about the business of staying in touch and how our realtor has done a really good job, including giving us a pie for Thanksgiving, to stay in touch and kind of just remind us that he exists and that it's very easy to get in touch with him. So I did a blog post about that the other day and how that strategy can be used by creators even at scale, I think. And my Sunday sit-down video this past week was about push your luck games. I actually couldn't believe that I hadn't done a video about push your luck games because they've been one of my favorite genres of games for the last couple of years. And so I did my top 10 list for push your luck games. That's on YouTube right now. Amin says, what software do I use for quick card prototypes? I don't know if I have anything that is really quick, but I use InDesign for my prototypes. And it's pretty quick at this point because I have some good templates set up. Chris says, when will we hear more on an expansion to My Little Scythe? Chris, I think I'm comfortable answering that at this point. I will be talking about the My Little Scythe expansion on January 29th. I believe that's a Wednesday. It should be a Wednesday, January 29th. Chad says, did I recently see Jakob's new art set in a desert? It really got me excited about the thought of revisiting Scythe characters, but in a new setting. Yeah, I did see that on Instagram. If you follow Jakob on Instagram, you can see his art there. I thought that was really cool. Kaz says, what do I think about the Dark Tower Kickstarter? Have I thought about making a game that works with an app? Yeah, I talked a little bit about the Dark Tower a few minutes ago, comparing it to another campaign Beyond the Monolith that wasn't doing well, but even though they're kind of similar. In terms of what do I think about it, I think it looks pretty cool. I'm listening to Rob talk on the Game Design Roundtable podcast right now, or not right now, but today, and it's making me kind of curious about the game. As for making a game that works with an app, I think it's really cool, but I still am inclined to turn off screens when I play games. I don't want any screens on, and just the development headache that could result, because I have never, ever seen a digital game be delivered on time. And so I don't want to hinge like a huge game that we invest a ton of money into on an app that is delivered 2 years late. I can't risk that. So for that reason, I have no plans of using an app in a game, at least not the original version of the game. Maybe some future version of the game might have it, but not the original. Joe says, do I play mini games solo? And Joe, I do not. I do not play mini games or hardly any games at all on the tabletop solo. I do occasionally play digital ports of games, and when I do, I play them against the AI. So it's essentially a solo game at that point, digitally. Angel says that he just bought my book. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate you doing that. Yeah, that's a crowdfunder strategy guide. It came out a couple of years ago, but I read through it recently to see if it still applies, the advice in it still applies today, and I think it still does. It's a lot. It's not like a lot of nitty gritty stuff. It's more like this is how you can use a community or work with a community and build relationships to be successful at creating something new, particularly on Kickstarter. Connor says, have I played Pret-a-Porter? I have not played Pret-a-Porter, Connor. And he says that he recommends it here. So yeah, that's cool. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I've heard good things. I think Portal Games does great work, so I'm curious about that. On a personal note, my refrigerator stopped working a couple days ago, or our refrigerator stopped working. So we have been using a mini fridge. It is odd to go from a full-size fridge to a mini fridge, and we lost some food as a result. I'm looking over. I work from home, so I'm looking over at my kitchen right now. So yeah, going through that right now. Not a major inconvenience, but just a little weird to go through. And hopefully we'll get that back up and working soon. Kevin says, as a friendly local game store owner, your games are almost impossible to find at any of the major distributors. As a Stonemaier champion, I'm disappointed that I can't share these experiences with my customers. Are you making changes on the supply side? What are your thoughts on the issue? Well, Kevin, yeah, that's a good question. I'm sorry that you haven't been able to get our games from distributors. I think that's a bit of a broad statement because a lot of our games are available at distributors right now. We have 9 games. I would say probably 6 or 7 of them are available right now. Charterstone isn't because it's been out of print for a little while, but it's coming back into print. Scythe always sells really quickly, and so we make Scythe pretty much constantly, but it sells quickly. So you got to get in those pre-orders to your distributors so they can make sure to order some. And Wingspan obviously has been a huge seller for us, sells very well, and we made over 200,000 copies of Wingspan last year. So it is not really a supply issue. It's more an issue of who distributors are actually selling those games to. So I would recommend that you work on improving your relationships with distributors and recommending to those distributors that they order from us well in advance so that we know how many copies to make for them. I'm happy to make copies for distributors, but once we enter production, those games are allocated. They're allocated in a variety of ways to a variety of distributors around the world. So the best thing you can do is communicate to distributors how many games that you want of ours, and those distributors that way, they can relay that information to us to influence actual print runs of the games rather than coming in when it's too late and we've already made the games. But again, for the vast majority of our games, they're in stock right now. And if you're having trouble getting Between Two Castles, actually Between Two Cities is temporarily out of stock, but it is being reprinted. But if you can't get Between Two Castles, My Little Side, Viticulture, we have them all right now, and others. I'm missing a few games right now. But if your distributor does not have them, it's because they haven't bought those games from us, and we have them in stock right now at our warehouse. So hopefully you can take care of that. Lisa says, Lisa's running to the idea of playtesting at her local store, which I think is awesome, Lisa, that you are looking for more ways to bring people into your store. That's a friendly local game store. Nathan says, any thoughts on knowing when to stop playtesting and how you spot that line of diminishing returns? Part of it's a gut feeling. You got to go with your gut. And part of it is, in my opinion, there's a question that I ask in our playtesting surveys, which is on a scale from 10, like on the BGG scale of 1 to 10, how much do you enjoy this game? And ideally, you would see that number go up every time you do a new wave of blind playtesting. And if it's not going up, then it's a bad thing. I usually look for games to get into that 8 average, 8.5 average for the playtesting version before I decide, okay, the game is good to go. Also, it's a matter of, playtesting is also about getting the rulebook right, getting the balance right. So those are other things to keep in mind. Once you feel that you have those things right and the numbers reflect that you have those things right, then you kind of have a hunch that it's ready to go. At least I do. Chris says, for playing Skull Hollow the first time, the Fox and Heroes are always in opposition of the Guardians. You'll be able to change the royalty Fox and Hero that will change strategy each game. Okay, cool. Sounds great. Yeah, that's good. Gerald says, have I played the deck builder Kashgar, and what is your favorite Dominion expansion? I haven't played Kashgar. My favorite Dominion expansion is Prosperity. I love that you can go big with points and money in Prosperity. Adam says, would I ever do videos covering design topics like brainstorming, prototyping, playtesting, and even design diaries, as I do like learning about how a game came to be? Design diaries, I do have. I have it in written format on our website. You can see them for any game that we've released since Charterstone or Charterstone and beyond. You can find the design diaries on our website. Very detailed stuff. As for adding design, really my YouTube channel is about game design. Usually I focus on a specific game and I talk about a favorite mechanism in that game. So I'm not necessarily talking about brainstorming or prototyping or playtesting, but I do have a video about all those things. And sure, I'll make a note of it. Maybe I can do a video that's specifically about my design process or something like that. I'm not equipped to teach anyone these things, but I can share the things that I do to see if that helps. But I do have like a comprehensive video about that on my channel, one of the earlier videos that I did. I'll make a note of that. I donated blood the other day. I usually do that. I mentioned that it was my birthday last week. One of my birthday traditions is that I try to use that day or someday very close to that to give blood. So I donated whole blood and went super smoothly. Like I used to be afraid of it. Years ago, I was afraid of what it would be like to give blood. And then I did it and I was like, oh, that was easy and fine. And I'm a little thirsty, but that's it. And so I've been doing that twice a year for around 10 years now, I think. So I'm curious if you've done it, if you had hangups about it, and if you tried it and you got over it and were fine. I usually also treat myself afterwards like a cookie or a cupcake. So I have a fun little incentive to go do it. And also the other non-fun thing I was going to mention in terms of what I've been up to in terms of business, to my business, is end of year accounting. It's that time of year where I have to report a lot of things to our accountant. We still have numbers that are coming in over the next couple of months for distributor payments, because distributors typically pay on a delay. But we're getting those numbers in. So it's just one of those business things that maybe you don't think about until you end up running a business, that you have to work on that accounting either yourself or hire an accountant. But even when you hire an accountant, you have to give them a lot of the information from independent contractors, all your numbers, your expenses, your revenue, all that stuff. So we're working on that now. Tom says, return to Dark Tower's retailer level is one of the best I've seen. Our game group is super excited to be able to get the game and support our friendly local game store. I'm glad you highlighted that. I noticed that at it was like $50, I think. I'm making note of that. Dark Tower retailer level. And Lisa, if you're still watching this, I'm curious what you think about the Dark Tower retailer level as well. Tom says, what's your experience with Kickstarter and retailer tiers? Any pitfalls I should warn them about? I actually do have a blog entry fairly recently about that, Tom. What did I call that? Let's see. Stillmeyer Games. I'll look up retailers to see if I can find it. Okay, so search for Stillmeyer Games, the current state of retailers and Kickstarter, and you'll see my thoughts on it. Delves into basically the idea that it is hard to get it right, and if you don't get it 100% right, retailers might blast you. So I recommend basically in the blog post that you either go all out in supporting retailers, or you don't try to support them at all through your Kickstarter. So all or nothing, basically, because if you try to hit that middle ground and try to do something for you, something for your backers, something for retailers, that you're just going to kind of make everyone a little disappointed. So yeah, the current state of retailers and Kickstarter, I posted that back in July. Travis says, sorry if I missed this, but reprint runs of Wingspan are coming up, I hope. Yeah, Travis, we are on, I think, the 13th printing of Wingspan. We're pretty much printing one print run a month, which is a lot for a game. So yeah, pretty much every month we'll have new games coming in. I think the next print run, the latest print run should be arriving at retailers right around now. And then the next print run, we have to deal with the Chinese New Year, so it might be as late as April. So it might be actually a little bit of a month gap there due to the Chinese New Year. John says, what's the next big game release for Stillmeyer Games? We'll find out later this year, won't we? Roger says, can I expand on the 6th submission requirement? He quotes it here. If your game has a number of phases, please don't submit it to us. I'm not sure if you simply don't want games with a fixed number of rounds, or the problem is specifically with phases within a turn or a round. A quick example, would that rule exclude Lords of Waterdeep? No, wouldn't exclude Lords of Waterdeep. The type of phases I'm talking about, and perhaps I thought I had an example on the forum, but maybe I don't have one there, Roger. But what I'm talking about are games where there's a farming phase. Everyone do your farming actions. Okay, everyone done with your farming actions? Okay, everyone do your income actions now. Okay, everyone done with that? Okay, everyone do your movement actions. I don't know why games break them. Like, that's an antiquated version of design to me, that you break them down into those phases. Instead of doing that, just let players choose when they want to take their farming action, take their income action, take their movement action. They have those choices on their turns. They can choose one of them on their turn, rather than having this game manager level of phases that you need to do in the game. Also, I guess a variant of it that I'm not a big fan of are when turns are broken into a long series of a number of actions and phases. Basically, when any turn in a game is going to take longer than a minute on average, due to the number of things you've asked a player to do during their turn. I think that's also kind of antiquated design. There are exceptions to that, but in general, I avoid that in our games. I like short, quick, simple turns, but I think that element is mentioned in a different part of the game submission form. Joe says, what movies am I looking forward to in 2020? Joe, I haven't done my most anticipated movie list, but I need to do that on my personal blog soon. So I will do that soon. Right now, let me think if there's anything that jump out. I'm curious about the Black Widow movie. I love Marvel movies. I always look forward to Pixar's movies. I think they have one that's like fantasy set in the suburbs, like traditional fantasies, a character set in the suburbs. I'm sure there are many other movies, but I need to go through the list and do my master list. So not ready to answer that yet, but I will answer that on my personal blog soon. A quick water break here, then come back. I have a question from David here. David says, with so many versions and expansions for Viticulture and Scythe, could you make a video explaining all of those, sort of outside your normal video system, like your multi-year retrospective on the company? I know there's a graphic on the Viticulture website, but honestly, I'm not sure I understood what the options are. Well, I can keep it simple for you for Viticulture. And David, maybe I'll do a video about that. You're right, that isn't typically what I video about on YouTube. But There's only one version of Scythe, the retail version. That's the version that's been in existence for a long time. And really, there's only been one version of Viticulture in existence for the last 5 years. It's the only relevant version. It's the Essential Edition. So you get the Essential, and that's really the only version you can find unless you dug way deep on eBay to find an older edition. So get the Essential Edition of Viticulture. And then if you want to expand it, you can expand it to any of the expansions. None of them have any level of redundancy or overlap with the other expansions. And same with Scythe. You can get Scythe is the core game, and then there's a big chart on our website that shows all the different stuff that you can add on to your copy of the game. But again, there's no redundancy between any Scythe and any of the other stuff that you can get. So having said that, I'm curious where the confusion is beyond that, because I want to make sure that's very clear on our website, but maybe I've made it too complicated with that long chart that is largely irrelevant now, because I think most people don't know about those older versions of Viticulture. They're not relevant at this point. We've printed so many more copies of the Essential Edition than any previous version of it that I think you'd have to dig pretty deep to find those older editions. And I think it'll be pretty clear, given how deep you'd have to dive to find them, that they are out of date or that they're not relevant for figuring out which version of Viticulture to get. Get the Essential Edition. It's the official version. It's been so for quite some time. Dave goes ahead and sums up the type of phases I don't like here. Thank you, Dave, for doing that. Gerald says, I see Kickstarter creators saying that the retail release will be 3 months after backers receive their games. Would that not cost a lot of money for small creators to keep games stored at a warehouse for 3 months? I don't think it will cost all that much money. It depends on how many games there are. Warehouse storage costs aren't that high. Those are games they could be selling, but I think I like the intent there. I mean, I think it's kind of reassuring to backers that they're going to get the games first, and even when a fulfillment process takes a long time, that they'll get the games before retail customers. For a backer that is essentially loaning a Kickstarter creator their money for a long period of time, I think that's part of the value proposition. So I don't think that the storage costs are not going to add up to be all that much. Miles says, have I checked out the plan win list for Geekway Mini? If so, are there any that I'm eager to play? I have not. I need to do my list soon of games that I'm really eager to play at Geekway Mini, but I haven't looked at the plan win list. Where is that, Miles? Could you send me a link to it? Plan win games. Here we go. But there's not really oh, yeah, okay. I'll just scroll through that and see if there's anything that jumps out. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'll do this after I get off the video. Yeah, thanks, Miles. Lisa responded to my question. Lisa is a store owner. She watches these videos, and Lisa is responding to my question about how she feels about the retailer level on Return to the Dark Tower. Yeah, she just said, looks great. Yeah, cool. The way it's worded here, in case you're watching this and don't read the comments, is it says, this is for verified brick and mortar game stores only. Pledge at this level to ensure participation in the retailer Kickstarter program. Pledge $50 now and set your order and pay when the game is ready to ship. Minimum of 4 copies, probably 1 case of the game. Pledge funds are applied as a credit to your final order. That's actually very nice. They're applying that. I'm curious if they'll charge shipping for it. That's probably noted elsewhere on the page. Yeah. Ernani says, according to your email chart, it's also on our e-newsletter section of our web page, Stonemaier Games will release 2 brand new games this year. Am I correct to assume one is designed by you and the other is designed by someone else? We'll find out. We'll find out later in this year when I announce them. Adam says, from a company point of view, what level of art do you feel is acceptable for pitching a game? I would say pretty much no art at all. If you do have a certain vision for the art, you could use a sample image, maybe one that you found from an artist online, got their permission to use. Just as a temporary placeholder to show the company, hey, this is the type of art that I envision in this game, but it's still the publisher's decision to actually make that art. But otherwise, you're just looking for functional, intuitive graphic design, not final graphic design at all, but just a playable game basically is what you're looking for. And if you want to make it look a little, if you want to spruce it up a little bit, that's great, but it's not recommended or well, I wouldn't say it's not recommended. There are game submissions that we've gotten that look very nice. Not really much art to them, but the graphic design does look nice, and it does make it a little bit easier to play, a little bit more appealing than playing a very stark prototype. But definitely don't spend money on it. Just if you're submitting to a publisher, just make it as usable as possible, is my recommendation. Other publishers might recommend other things. Tom says that there's an informational PDF about the retailer pledge. Retailers get stretch goals and they get a demo copy. That is pretty generous that they're getting a demo copy, perhaps if they buy a certain number of copies of the game. That is that's very generous. So they offer a free demo copy as well. Let's see if I have any other topics here. No, just emails coming through. I think I've covered all the topics today. I talked about how this is kind of a big week on Kickstarter with some interesting projects that are doing well and some that unfortunately aren't doing quite as well. Talked about games that I played recently, which include Takanoko, Fantastic Factories, Tapestry, and Monara. Tonight I'm looking forward to playing Role Player and Skull Hollow soon, and Isle of Cats soon. Talked about blog posts I did about Google Voice, staying in touch, my video about pushing your luck, and talked about Wingspan Purple Eggs. We've got the Wingspan Purple Eggs in our web store now. Oh, I started the video talking about Mariposas, the new game from Elizabeth Hargrave about butterflies, blood donation, and end-of-year accounting, and plus all the questions that you guys asked today. So thank you for chiming in with those questions. Let me see if there are any others before I head on out. Sean says, would I want a shelf built for behind you with the ceiling angle? I could, but I actually have my printers right there, so I have stuff that goes on this wall here that I'm happy with. Yeah, it is a weird angle here with the ceiling, but I don't know, it's fine. My game shelf is right off camera. You can see my cat. Where's my cat? Biddy. Biddy is right. I'll stop pointing my finger on the screen. Biddy is over here, and then game shelf is over there, right off camera. Cat food is down there. Cat is there. Litter boxes are there. Chris says, what type of business plan or model or types of games do you see your company utilizing making in 10 years from now, with the caveat of Stonemaier has been basically successful? I don't have a 10-year plan. I have more like a 3-year plan. I plan about 3 years out. And it's kind of a plan of doing the same thing that we do now. Publishing 1 to 2 new games a year, a few new expansions or accessories each year, and continuing to try to build a community, to have better customer service, to make cool stuff and support it, basically. So it's pretty much the same. We have found our path and we are sticking to that path for now. But things could change also. That's why I don't try to plan too far ahead, because things can change and can wildly change that strategy. So that's the plan so far. Carlos says, who are the past or current board game designers you enjoy the most? Some of my favorites are Alexander Pfister, Rob Davio, Uwe Rosenberg. I really have come to enjoy Phil Walker Harding's work, like Sushi Go, Baron Park. He's a really, really great designer. Ryan Lockett, wonderful designer. It's hard to name them because there's so many designers that I enjoy. I'm trying to think of designers that I enjoy multiple games from those designers. Looking at my shelf here to see if any jump out. Antoine Bauza is awesome. John Gilmore, really quality work. Yeah, Daryl Andrews. Look at the games that I have multiple games from those designers. Yeah, those are a few. Ernani says, do I see myself working only with board games until you retire, or do I think you might work with something else in the future? I don't know. That's a good question. I didn't ever think that this would be my career, and so I'm just grateful every day that I get to have this career. And if that ever changes, maybe I don't ever really picture myself retiring. I love working in some capacity too much to ever truly retire. But my other creative passion was creative writing, or writing fiction. And so someday I might like to return to that a little bit. Amin says, did I write a business plan for Stonemaier Games at the start? No, I didn't. I could have. I respect people that write business plans, and maybe I had like a brief proposal because we took an investor very early on in the company. But I think what I found with business plans is that you often really don't know what business you're in until you try to start trying to build an audience or sell something, and then you kind of learn along the way. And so I've been hesitant to write business plans until I'm actually in the midst of the business itself, until I actually know what business I'm in. Chad says, how avidly do I try to make new game mechanisms while designing the game? Do I think there are enough mechanisms now, but could be tweaked? I definitely try to do something that's different and innovative. Even early on in the process, if I'm designing a game that might be inspired by a couple of other games, I'm like, okay, what am I doing here that's unique and different and special? And how can I accentuate those points and really highlight them in the game? I also I iterate so much during the design process that usually whatever I start out with ends up being very different in the long run. And so a lot of the things that I've implemented that maybe aren't seen as revolutionary, but they're I think different than whatever in different games, have come from me just kind of stumbling into them through playtesting. So it is in my mind to do something innovative and unique, but a lot of the discoveries I make just happen by going through the design process itself. Adam says, is there any designer that I would love to work with? Yeah, Rob Davio, Alexander Pfister, Uwe Rosenberg. I have gotten to work with Uwe Rosenberg a little bit on More Visitors, an expansion for Viticulture. Ryan Lockett would be fun. Keith Mateka would be really cool. Ignacy would be cool. Any of those designers I mentioned before would be awesome. Although I say all this with a big caveat, which is a question I answered earlier about co-designing a game, which is just because I want to work with them doesn't mean that we actually work well together. I have no idea if we'd actually work well together. And given that all those designers have been lead designers on other games, I don't know. And I am inclined to be a lead designer on a game, not a secondary designer. We might clash a little bit. So as cool as it would be to work with those creative minds, I don't know if we actually would work well together. Miles says, do I listen to podcasts about book series that I enjoy? He started listening to the Howler Pod for Red Rising and enjoy it. I haven't done that. I mostly just listen to gaming related podcasts, but I appreciate the recommendation. I should listen to that because I do love Red Rising. Nathan says, I think Nathan's kind of saying, would I write a novel in the Scythe universe? Probably not. I love the Scythe universe, but it's so much Jakob's thing. It's not my universe. So I would love to see Jakob work with an author to write a book in that universe. Carol says, have I tried to add my passion for fiction writing into a board game? Narratives are a big part of some games and can enhance a game. Carol's referring, I think, to written narrative in games. There is some in Charterstone. There is some in Rise of Fenris, although Ryan wrote all of that. I am working on a game right now that has a lot more writing than previous games that I've designed. So that is a fun outlet. But even then, I'm constricted by space often because I don't want to design a game that requires players to read long paragraphs of text. And so as they play, so it's an interesting restriction to want to have the writing flow, but also want it to fit into like 2 sentences. Evan says, when I got my Tapestry back in the pre-order, it was missing an armory, as way too many copies of Tapestry are for some reason. We don't know why. And he never filled out the form to get a replacement. Is there a limit on the time frame to request it? And the answer is no. Fill out the form whenever you want, and we'll get that part to you. Although Evan says, I'd rather wait till the next time I buy a product to keep it all in one box. And Evan, I appreciate that, but we ship products that we sell from a different location than our replacement products are shipped. So I would recommend just ordering whatever you want from our web store if you have something to order, and just going ahead and filling out the replacement parts form. We'll send that separately. But I appreciate you trying to do that. If you do have any other missing parts from any of our other games, definitely consolidate them in the same request because they will come from the same place. But new product orders will not come from the same place as the replacement parts shipper. That's Joe. We have a warehouse and we have Joe. Nathaniel says, I read an article the other day that spoke about the growth of the industry's consumer-based plateauing, the increasing number of games entering the market, and the difficulty of competing in the board game space. Do I think publishers will soon begin to struggle? That's a great question. I think the future is somewhat uncertain there, given the number of how easy it is to enter the board game space, the number of successful publishers, the number of games. But I also think the number of gamers is going to continue to grow. So my hope is that publishers, and I've heard that actually AEG, the publisher of Mariposas that I mentioned earlier, for they're doing this, So Many Games does this. I hope publishers become pretty selective, that they and designers too, honestly, that we become pretty selective about the things that we publish or that we submit to publishers, so that that we're putting the best games out there. We're not just filling space so that we can fit a goal of X number of games a year. Stonemaier Games, we like to put out 1 to 2 games a year, but if I don't have 1 to 2 great games to put out this year, I'm not going to release them. I would rather put out 0 games, 0 new games, than put out a game that is just fine. That's my general challenge to designers and publishers, and I hope we see that. But I think in general, because of the growing number of gamers and as designers and publishers are becoming more selective, I don't think it'll be a huge issue, but I could be wrong. We'll find out. Scott says, what aspects of a sell sheet do I look at most as a publisher that you'd recommend someone to focus on when making their sheet? The only aspect of a sell sheet that I care about is the designer's name, their email address, and some sort of visual reminder of what the game looks like. Because the only time that I get a sell sheet is at Gen Con, which I don't even attend every year. And it's after I've actually played the game with the designer. And I need something to remember when I talk about that game with my co-founder later and decide if it's something that we want to pursue. I need to be able to remember, okay, this is what the game was, and this is who the designer was, and this is how to get in touch with them. Oh, and the game name itself. But other than that, I think, Scott, you'll get very different advice from other publishers because they use very different techniques for accepting submissions. But for us, we have a submission form on our website. We don't even care about a sell sheet. That part doesn't really matter to us. Angel says, do I see myself designing a different type of board game, like fillers, party games, something like that? If it fit into the style of Stonemaier game that we would publish, like a game that fits all of our submission requirements, basically. But would be, yeah, I would. I mean, I love different design challenges. Not really what we're known for. So I think it would have to be a game that would still make sense to people that follow our games. But I love design challenges. And so, sure, I could see that happening in the future. Getting thirsty. Amin says, did I ever fill in a business model canvas? It's from a book called Business Model Generation. I don't think I've done that. No. Tell me about it. Tell me what you like about that method. Chris says, but again, I mean, I would not spend. I don't like to spend a lot of time planning what my business will be. I'd rather spend my time executing and discovering what my business is. Chris says, fun question. What have you been watching to scratch your Game of Thrones itch? Witcher, Lord of Rings, Lord of the Rings. I did just finish the Witcher series. Yeah, we just finished that. And I really, once I was no longer confused, I really enjoyed it. Chad says that he's loving the gray ink color on the new ambassador t-shirts. Why the change? He's publicly scolded me if I shouldn't have said anything about the new ambassador tees. That's true. This isn't, the ambassador Facebook group is probably a better place for that. But basically, we wanted to use, so on like this shirt right here, this is kind of a plasticky material that's put on the shirt. I really like the blend method of printing where it's kind of integrated into the shirt itself. And to do that, for that blend to stand out enough on the Stonemaier Games t-shirt, we needed to use a darker color than white or beige. Stefan says, when you took your first board game to Kickstarter, how much of it did you manage yourself and which part did you get help to? I would say 100% of the work. I obviously outsourced to graphic designers and illustrators, people and manufacturers, things like that, things that I do not have skill sets for. But in terms of managing it, it was all me. Yeah, looks like I reached the end of those questions. Thank you all for joining me today, just right at the hour mark. Yeah, thanks for your questions. If you watch this video in the future, either on YouTube or on the podcast or even here on Facebook. The best place to post questions, because I get notifications for them, is on YouTube. So I'll post those questions there, and I'm happy to answer them there or even explore them on next week's video if you want to do what Rudy did this week and ask me a question in advance of me going live. All right, take care. Have a great Wednesday. I'll see you next week. Bye.